我上
上
也
也觉
觉当
得
作业，
也就能来着。
讲究把多当年节人节，大概建作业别所能见，多了边界上建筑把了就。上也觉当作业就能来，讲究把多当年节人节。大概前所也别所能见，多了边界上建筑把了就。上也觉当作业就能来。上周巴多达尼耶孙杰大给建造业别所能，多拉宾杰桑建筑巴拉修，圣贤当杰电话当地位就当电巴拉，圣贤当杰东安当东安地就当查瓦人就接，圣贤当杰东安没别电话当没查瓦人。Sem chen tam che ni rin cha ta ni tan da ve ta nyum la ne pa ra yu ru che sem chen tam che de wa tan de ve gyu tan de pa sem chen tam che tung al tan tung al ji gyu tan da wa ran gyu che sem chen tam che tung al me ve de wa tan me da wa ran sem chen tam che ni rin cha ta ni tan da ve ta nyum la ne pa ra yu ru che sem chen tam che de wa tan de ve gyu tan de pa ra Simchen Damje Dungal Dan Dungal Ji Yudan Tawaran Yuji Simchen Damje Dungal Mebe Dewa Dan Midawan Simchen Damje Nirin Jada Nidan Dave Dan Nyum La Ne Baran Yuroji Boy Dajibi Ye Doi Doi No Re ro re je nye de ye bo ni san ye jin do me de bo ye do gue non do jin do je bo So, Idaya Guru Renamita Lakaniya Darya. In English, I take refuge in Buddha Dharma and
Sangha. And by the
Sangha.
merit created in this practice, may I attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of
For
all
all
sentient
sentient
beings.
beings.
From
From
now
now
until
until
my
my
enlightenment, I take refuge
refuge
in the
in
Buddha, the
Buddha
Dharma,
Dharma
and
and
Sangha.
Sangha.
And by
By
the
the
merit
merit
created
created
in
in
this
this practice,
practice,
may
may I
I
attain
attain
the
the
state
state
of Buddhahood for the benefit of
of all
all sentient
sentient beings.
beings. From now until my enlightenment, I
I
take
take
refuge
refuge
in the
in
Buddha,
Buddha
the
Dharma
Dharma, and
and
Sangha.
Sangha.
And
And
by
by
the
the
merit
merit created
created
in
in
this
this
practice,
practice,
may
may
I
I
attain
attain
the
the
state
state
of
of
Buddha
Buddhahood for the benefit of
for all
all sentient
sentient beings.
beings. May
All
all
sentient
sentient
beings
beings enjoy happiness
happiness
in its
and
causes.
causes.
May
May all
all sentient
sentient
beings
beings
be
be
free
free from
from suffering
suffering
in
and
its
causes.
causes.
May
May
all
all sentient
sentient
beings
beings
never be separate from joyful bliss.
may
May all
all
sentient
sentient
beings
beings
have in equanimity, free of vice, attachment, and anger.
may all sentient beings
Enjoy happiness in its causes. May
may
all
all
sentient
sentient beings be
beings
free from suffering and any causes. May all
all sentient
sentient
beings
beings
never be separate
from
from
joyful
joy.
bliss.
May
May
all
all
sentient
sentient
beings
beings
abide in equanimity, free of vice, attachment. May all sentient
sentient
beings
beings
enjoy happiness in its causes. May all sentient beings be free from suffering in its causes. May all sentient beings never be separate from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of vice, attachment.
and God.
Anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, marked yellow, and circled by the four continents, surrounded by the sun. I visualize this Buddha forth and offer it, and all living beings enjoy the pure. Edamon Guru Namanda Lakam Nidiyatayam.
Tamala, thank you, won't delay, touching you won't delay. Good afternoon to all.
Yep.
Peneta train the lobs and the Kasama to the lobs and the Tamara. Ilmamotinity, the Todi, the
It
Ringos and the Chamara.
time I think it's a lensai.
Allen. The Lincoln. Allen.
There might be any sketch or something.
Allen.
Time
The Tirindi Tandati, Tano on Shiki.
yeah.
Or the Chet, the Dimala, the Gomas of an online, Kazan, the Tiwato, the Zumati Tauto, Takan, Chitani. Tende chicha lori tuen la sopa ene chik tanga zo chane ene chik tui kyun ki ene chigo namsung dan tewa to kare yo re se yuwa terwa. Tiyan ti tewa ya kutu chidani de samkola sam tuksem shego ya de ke chenpo re ta chidani nga zo di chango ya zo do de chir nga zo tanga zo zewa da dunga chik zewa doba da dunga me doba chir te ta na jingi chidani ene 지단에 정부는 대강 라인에 동al 망보시 준비 요래 대한 질 준이 기본 준이 기본한 동al 요바 요래 다나 진행한 좀 미기 수배 내 동al 망보시 요래 당원도 다 텔라인에 동len 체약이 탑람도 다직 저 당원도 ngaran 저기 니마 니르기 미소소 미레모레게니 가리 난국도 디콜라 당원도 제거로와 딘디 선발라 당원도 제기 탑람도 조응한 저니 소소소소 랑기기 셈둘 둘와다 시와 딘디 제기 탑람데 체계도 선발라 디콜라는 간저 로존 제거로 이 로존 체계 탑람기니 리바도 다나라 다디죠 덴소기 덴소 안에 다치 로리 된라 소파 덴데 차와 텔라 테네 당한 저 슝센다 센 넘버 상기비 슝 테단 대와 이트 잠발랑 저 시시티 라인은 직선로 단에 다디가라 덴데 단다 도탄 도시 바로 어디 직선
Uh, to continue with our discussion from last class about why we engage in studying these seven types of consciousness or cognition, um, uh, and how these are related to our kind of daily practices or daily kind of way of life. And this question is a good question as well as an important question to kind of contemplate upon. And the reason why we are engaged in this kind of study, the common thing across all beings is that we all desire happiness and don't want even the slightest suffering. And when we look at the nature of the suffering, there are many different types or forms of suffering, some being kind of natural, and many suffering beings created by humans. And we try to sort of cultivate ways and methods to cope and to kind of deal with those suffering. And we does, this through kind of various different individuals' approach. We all do our own way to deal with our own suffering and problem. And as a method to deal with our own suffering and to sort of cope and, we try to train or tame our mind. And when taming and training our mind, there comes, the understanding of the nature of the mind or our consciousness. So under that comes, these seven classifications or types of mind and many, many other Buddhist texts and scriptures or topics.
완전히 다치다니 단다디나 숨바나지 다디디나라 슈바나지레 단다디 지단에 라진경아 저 깨와다 나와다 치워 동안 라진경아 저 예바르데 다치다니가 저 단다 데데마인 바니가 저 찔는가 저 미스베 동안 잠불린디나라 다치경아 저 직생교지 마년나 마도 되나라 만디파다마 직 마요 왔던데 샤다던데 거기다 어디인데 잠바 다딘 된소기 탑람도 당한조 단다 탑람 된소기 죄탑도 오잖아 당한조 가르라고 자 된소 시월 제알랑한 저기 즉 추네 추제 다수주 제약이 되돌아 베지 대양 조조 추제와 될라양 즉 낭sem네 낭sem께니 집 돌고 바디 등간에 슈바나신 디게 탑람도 텔라 디게 탑람 텔라 단다 디는 숨방아 저저 강 덴바 임바 덴바단 준바 제집제네 데 제집제 도와서 쌀 메도 쌀 메도 메롱와지 단당한 저 로리 된라 소바 덴데라 테네 용기 요바니 숨게도 디 선바 어디서 개침바에 봐서 덴데기 다 덴데도 되어요 대단하신 게 단디나 셴셴바 숑 단대와 있나요? 단디 로리 뜬다 소바 단대와 여기 좀 샤다 차게 좀 샤다 차게 해서 단디에네 데레스.
And generally, when we talk about nature of the suffering, there are some suffering which are kind of innate, such as birth, aging, illness, dying. These are already there, and then additional to that, there are many other sufferings that are created by humans, and nowadays, unless you listen to the news, it's all kind of problems, suffering, and something that we hear continuously. So in order to kind of ways or method to deal with those suffering or to kind of, fix those suffering, we engage in Dharma practices. And in Dharma practices, the primary practice is training or taming our own mind. And when training and taming our own mind, what is important here is the understanding of the what is fact or reality and what is, not the opposite or not fact. And so we need to kind of use our best skill to kind of investigate and analyze the nature of these facts. And in order to do that, it is sort of inevitable, to have an understanding of these processes of consciousness, 7 types or 7 classifications of the mind or cognition. And therefore, there is that connection there. And of course, these 7 types of classifications or classifications of mind comes in, in many other Buddhist texts or scriptures.
어디 제로 왔더니 단다 가산되게는마 단다 드링데 따라 단다 원시의 이승이 개발되는 되래서 되니 이 된나다 되게 쉬고로
Yes.
지금 안돼 쉬고 대실 성인의 양아 중에 디 가산데 깨들래 파서 이나게 와서 디셈버실로 포셔서
Sure.
그러면 되게 제시는 되죠 샤마 되실라 가래 지 도구면 되게 가산지 컨저 선조지 송송로
Yes.
어디죠
Uh, so today we'll continue with the text sense consciousness versus mental consciousness. And Geshe was talking about the continuation of the text and to lay out topics on each state, which I was informing him that I, informed him through WhatsApp several days before, but he didn't receive it. Maybe there's a miscommunication. So we'll talk this later and lay out, the topics for each upcoming dates. So today we will continue with the next topic, sense consciousness versus mental consciousness.
어디 디서말다 디스 지단 로모고지라 된지는 되는 도도도데 되게 원시의 이신이 개발돼 숨어도 또 원시의 이신이 개발 디디 개발돼 아니 ombo rangi tumo mai me da ke ombo su jen bala teni kebe ombo sheba da chima da ke yiki ombo so zamla teni kebe yiki sheba sa tadi da ke da kyuken ni kyu kebar ge gone ta wons ta chi wonse da ne yishe ze de sha ga di sha di su do teni dila zo di wa de la ni di 원시 는 신이 이번에 다 켄지 권이 자 답이 켄조 쳔 가르치 마치게 권이
ene chik wanshe dang ani yisi ki khyapar de shagati te pe di tanda di nga ki ta nga te shadwa ode de chik shuna nga te la chidan nga te la lakpa dang yus tu dunya la sopa mangpo shi yore te tiki ene ta te la ene nga ta se se kwe kinzen de zo de chele de ene kwe ene nga ki cheba de ti chani lakpa ana jengi ene wanshe dang 이시 이게 직 민다 원세단 이시세 답고 이게 이제 또 다힌 제마 다힌 무슨 제마라 때니 개베샤네 아니 원세단 아니 게 이게 온부 이게 다힌 이게 온부 소라 때니 제베샤네 이시세 디 직수나
인지까지도 로어 말해.
bet malona di sar kontrol ti kapute to di shishana
Yes. So the differences between sense consciousness and mental consciousness, the primarily differences comes from, as it says in the text, it's uncommon dominant condition, uncommon dominant condition. And uncommon dominant condition, which is based on mental sense faculty, is mental consciousness. But uncommon dominant condition, which are sense faculty, are considered as sense consciousness. So that is the primary kind of differences between these two, and therefore they are called or designated as such: mental consciousness and sense consciousness. And for the example, it is the example on page 50. The sound of drum. Although the sound of drum arises from using, there are many kind of things included in there, hand, stick, so on, but it is not referred to as those things. The drum, it is called sound of the drum because drum is its uncommon cause. The same kind of way, sense and mental consciousness are called, sense and called respectively because of their uncommon dominant condition.
어디가 나타난다 저도 윤수소 대응하 버티 미현다 미소 엄봉아 다켄체네 엄봉아 이렇게 디슈스 주세 어디데 주도 원케 다켄체네 원케 원싱아 버티 다켈라스 이게 세번 두모만이 베다케 이게 이시데 저데 이시 그런 경우는 이게 봐마도 조진 같은 게 말해서 있습니다. 어찌단다 노던 노이
So the very beginning part, the 6 categories of consciousness: eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body consciousness, plus mental consciousness. These are 6 categories of consciousness. The first 5 are sense consciousness, each of which arises in dependence on the physical sense faculty, and that is its own uncommon dominant condition. The last, the mental consciousness, which arises in dependence on the mental sense faculty, that is its dominant condition. So that is how these two are differentiated. And to sort of support this statement, we have a quote from Dekyong's Compendium of Valid Cognition, which says that a sense consciousness is named based on a sense faculty because this is its uncommon sense. Its experience object is a whole because that sense consciousness is produced by many objects together. So the point in this verse is that the sense consciousness is named based on because of its uncommon cause or dominant cause.
어디지 다다다다디 와델라 아니 빼기고네 아니 다치 미시다 원셰다 이시기 개발되지 숨도 어디야 야고도 미기 답변은 미기 셰바지기 메토나츠 벤토라지다 따와테스니 메토기 tum라테나 메토 믹미도 노소여바 토나 미기 셰바텔라테 소마니 직 초지도 뒤되바지 된데지 난게서 난게도 갈때 때 메도 찍되는 수다 대능에는 메도 찍 수도니 제다바지 파니 또는 렌덴진에 따와이나 대고 대기에는 로데니 파 기경올라 파 로샤게도 도그레스 주주노 도그레 인다 어디
And the example to understand differences between these two is given on page 50, second paragraph. When you look at the garden, it says, containing many types of flowers, even though there are many different kinds of flowers in that garden, but to eye consciousness, they appear to as a single mass, kind of one thing, one big thing. But that is not the same how it appears to the mental consciousness. The mind cognitively selects a particular variety of flowers and apprehends it. And so in that case, it's sort of gone beyond the sense consciousness and becomes the mental consciousness. So that is a kind of a good example of how to differentiate between sensory consciousness, in this case, eye consciousness, and the mental consciousness, looking at the the flowers.
오늘 단어지 디와들라야 아니 미셸라 수 나와다 균형도 이니 나셸라 다트바 나와 이니 단데 단데 다니도 지군노 간다지 시체 율텔라 원시긴 진칭엘라스 다단다 디 손데 좀발라 당한조 텐데기 만다와 율직 왕봉의 율 만다와라 텐데 론츠베 갑라 다직 미게 수이 원통하다 다 니셰트 다이 나시 님보트와다 근데기 직 릭만다와 망보지 튀어서 되는 조조데 직 이지 셰바징원에 대화도지 용네 다 디게네 직 강라이네 년도 쳐와다 강라이네 직 따데 데데 이 왕게 에네 직 대모델라이네 디 두고여 버 수승게도
And along with that, the text talks about when visible forms appears to eye consciousness, and likewise sound to ear, and then five senses, and here it says that and these are object towards which an inclination, the wish to hear and the wish to see, is more strongly habituated, will be the only object that the sense consciousness comes to apprehend and determine on that occasion. So, there is a mental consciousness behind when sensory consciousness kind of focus on particular object, and then there is a inclination to particular object. At the end, it says, in this way, those inclinations, wishing to hear or wishing to see, are forms of mental consciousness. So these are done by the mental consciousness, or mental consciousness comes after, those inclinations.
오늘 따단다 디나싱기 따단다 네 다직 원싱하고 차상기 디치바치기하래 다나진기 주절에 소소소소라양 된데기 녀왕은 된데도 직 용어도 용어민도서 직시나 직 녀와의 경우에 다직 된데 용어 값술라 간디지 녀와도 간디지 용어도
So this applies to all five sensory consciousness. And Geshe was asking, what was your experience? Do you have any kind of sense or experience of this, eye consciousness, the sensory consciousness, looking at the or apprehending the object, and then maybe followed by this forms of mental consciousness.
근데 디노라 숨바나지데 지단이 단당한 좋다 바게디 율응아디기 냠도 다치 율응아보디기 직 근데 통화이나리 냐이나리 리아이나리 근데 당한 저 디차고로 이나야 데 차르고도 단다 셰다 디기 셰랄로 니파도 이 경원에 강라이네 직 단데 단 티셰치와 이데 잉올 교토도 잠발라 셴데조 다치 나라망에반 줄그레스 송도티 다랑가도 미기 수 용통을 라버서 내가 제니 나 다치면 되는 체데 안치나나 망가 바래 송거로 되나신 원들이 제가 왔다 된소양 네 거는 투도
Uh, so when five sensory consciousness engaging or apprehending the object, such as eye looking at the sight, ear listening or apprehending a sound, and so on and forth. Immediately that is followed by a mental consciousness, and as we saw earlier, the word to use here is inclination. Whichever object that you have inclined to, that is immediately followed by the mental consciousness, and then the other becomes what is called indeterminate consciousness. And so, for example, when you are looking at the beautiful sight, at the same time, if there is a sound that you are apprehending, because of your inclination towards that beautiful sight, more concentration, and the mind will follow, sort of pick up that the sight consciousness, and then the sound or hearing becomes indeterminate consciousness or cognition.
원빈들의 지단에 따뜻하니 즉 말하면 즉 탑시대 체대의 삼삼들의 향tik 스파드니 셀 삼로탄 디sambal라 향티 데셰데 따다 지레 사마레 데데 삼용도 데네 양 기랑 중문에 단다틱 갑골 슈 갑수 양직 데데 마레 삼삼도 데데 직 중앙이나 네 그것도 네 직 저와 나로나운스 라나 신케니 데남라게 인디 양직 마레 삼삼도에나 그것도 네 소로나스 쉐인 어디에 양 개침모도
Geshe is saying he's trying his best to kind of explain uh, according to his best understanding, but sometimes after the class he felt like he hasn't kind of explained sort of enough precisely, and the same kind of situation might happen when you're listening. This might not be exactly correct, or there's a question or doubt. So in that case, you're saying you should ask and raise questions, and also kind of informing me if there's anything that I need to clarify him. I should do likewise.
어디제 단어진기 디와라다 데네 마트네 이니 이게 셔바다 지단에 디차상 이셰다 원시긴기 제바도래 다 지단에 단다 디kop술라 다랑 이셰라야달라 당한적인 비균도 일단 네바다 마오바 또발라서 방한저 이기 셔바 용원에 당한정은네 가리 중화도 근데 지글로 니 숨당 다 지가리 넬라 가리 중화당 같은 또발라 직 촬영하셔라 또발라 차례다 근데 직 마오발라 직 제고 니 제고 삼베 직 삼야당 다 덴데기 똑바로 망보지 차례로 덴데기 이시기 제거를 지단에 가지고 하나 저기 덴데당 가서 일단 뇨 이게 용도 걸어 근데 원실라 때 덴데도 용거에서 말해
And again, further kind of differences between mental consciousness and sensory consciousness. For mental consciousness, as in your page 50, second last paragraph, through your mental consciousness, you can have appearances of the past as well as the future, and past referring to kind of several years back what you have done. Those can appear in your mind, as well as the future, what you want to do, your plannings. Those can appear in your mind, but and we all know this through our own experiences. But for the sensory consciousness, this doesn't work. There's no appearance of such past or future or concepts of designation and so on.
다는 이제 다디 원시대 이시대 왔다 원시대 미셸로서 왔다 유 디나라다 베스나 다데 유르몬 보살라 나와 몬볼라 단데기 일로 토베 율텔라 셈마테나 미시데 유살라 나야마토 셈테나 미시데 딩몬보 냐베 니시 테뉴시 다디 이기 셰바타랑세 투라 이기 셰바디 베센도 오지 말해. 다른 송대.
Vale, on the lower.
로난데 또 다른 디기 또 오지. 슈샤나디 메멜로모.
So, the second part of the last paragraph, uh, it used an example of a blue color. When eye consciousness is looking at the blue color will, appears to eye consciousness. And if there is a mind, if there's no mind behind that, sensory eye consciousness, then if there's no mind attending to it, then the eye consciousness will not sort of it says sort of realize or apprehend that blueness, and there has to be mental consciousness sort of supporting or to be with the eye consciousness to able to kind of say that I saw blue color or apprehend the blue color. So it talks about the more about the mental consciousness um, doing the functioning of apprehending or ascertainment that this is blue color.
미식 왕식이 개발돼 다른 디는 소문나진 다른 미식이 딜라야 미식이 된 주고입니다.
And another differences on page 51, this the first paragraph. Sense consciousness depend on the object, external object in its vicinity nearby. The object has to be nearby sense consciousness. And but however, that is not the case with the mental consciousness. The mental consciousness doesn't need or does not depend upon the presence of external object.
어디 제다디 차상제 데네데네 미식이 로고에 세다 게임도 다치 춘중 디 녜바체 저라도 와들레 안용솔지 셰발 뇽솔지 셰발 남수 수 인달라 소베 최달란 주베스 조 리단델로고니 주바당스 조 셈단델로고니 주바니 예바 나마라 원시다 치말라 이게 셰바 이게 이시지 자진 스스도 다치다는 다치 원시다 이시 또 대치 tanda su ndala sobe so nchobe so lüdandere goni choba tela ene che di che la wanshe da so singandere goni choba ni yebe ngam awdila wanshe da yishi se dindishi ken masunga da be chipshun.
So as was saying, probably there's no need to read each and every sentences you might have read ahead of time. Page 51 at the end. In brief, it says, when experiential consciousness engage an object such as a visible form or a sound, it does so in of two ways, primarily in relation to the body or primarily in relation to the mind. In the former case, the consciousness is called sense consciousness, and in the later case, it's called mental consciousness. Then it gives the further kind of examples of these two consciousnesses.
미기 셰베 소단 나웨 셰베 인다 소알 미기 셰베 소 통한 딜라테네 니데 소 땡원 제마다 나웨 셰베 다 소알 테네 다디 디단 디디레 덴데레 레세다 딜다 디엔사 야고레 딩엔 바레세 조디 가리 연제디 가리 치기 서잖아 다 이기 셰바디 치기 서로 네.
And then, it goes on saying that when the sensory consciousness, for example, eye consciousness apprehends form, likewise, ear consciousness apprehends sound, so on and forth. And then after that kind of moment, whether, such sight is good or bad, positive or not, is done by mental consciousness.
다나지 어디지 다나지 다네 페나 왕시데 페나 미게 왕시도 오지 차와이나 단당한 좀 미게 된데세 디나라 된데 통화돼서 된데 통거로 철거로 이나야 미숨 데데 삼발라이나 당한 이게 셰바되기 디나로기디 차상에네 철도반 디나지 다나지 딜라 네 어디니 무티니 왕시데 파 왕베 셰바데마 네데와이나 다 미좀 봤다고도 근데 제바이나 이게 제바되기 내가 지금 요한테 무도 근데 제거래서
And also the difference between these two sensory consciousness, as said in the text, page 52, first paragraph. Sense consciousness operates, when it is when say eye conscious when eye sense organ is open and looking around. When you look around, you will see, everything that you are seeing right now, and all appears to that eye consciousness. But when you close the eye, then it goes on to the mental consciousness. That appearance in your mind is just by the mental consciousness, not by the eye consciousness. And likewise, when you're closing your eyes or in a dreaming, all kind of appearance that you have is done by mental consciousness.
다는 이제 디나라니 밀람 진내가 소 공비 셔바디 저 제거 말에 이나 이기 또바디기 밀람 진내 이기 또바디 되기 밀람 나라니 대화 동안 소라라 소바 저나서 아니 다 용거로 다 지단에 가서 밀람 땅에 대해서 말라 가서 즉 하고 그러다 되는지 되는지 다 이기 셔바디기 되는지 되는지 지게 요바디나 숨도
And it says, during the dream state, the sense or eye consciousness particularly is not functioning, being, closed. But what appears in your mind, says all kind of experiences, pleasure, pain, and so on, all experienced by the mental consciousness.
세번나 이루지 다다니 단다 디 가수 에네직 뇨나서 여바치 제고고니 공에 셰바다 이루지 셰바링이 여바 다단다 수수 단다 디 가수 뇨고니 두개 여바디 단다 디 공도 슈바디기 땡기도 수수 당하랑 저 뒤길된도 직 돌아다 냠냠지고니
So what is being presented here is at the end of that paragraph says, our own experience demonstrate that there are two kinds of consciousness. So these are something that we experience personally in our day-to-day life, and therefore our experience kind of demonstrate that there are these two types of consciousness: sensory sense and mental consciousness.
다나 진딩을 데 메토 텔라 메토 두냐바다 디 메토 레삼바 지마다 메토 디 티마 심부 티마 심부도 삼빌로다 메토 제부도 삼빌로다 데 메토 디 데니 셰수 템바다 미좀베 감소 통화 데달라 소바데 조차사 엔다직 데도 단다 디나라 직낭다 제와다 동셈소 뇽소다 데 도자 컨트롤소 뇽몬쟁기 로션 신에단 라톤소 로리 신도 망보시 조 이기 셰베 때문에 저 이기 셰베 때문에 저기요 스타트에서 찾아 조데 다 이기 셰베고니 저기도 단데서 디스케이션으로
And then also in the second paragraph, text talks about, for instance, such as thoughts such as, there are flowers over there, and then these are flowers, and then these flowers smell sweet. Likewise, seeing flowers in a dream, and then there are many emotions such as fear, love, torment, and then there are also afflictive mental states, pride, hatred, attachment. These are primarily, sort of posited by the mental consciousness, and attachment, meditative states of calm abiding, special insight, so on and forth. As said here, all of these examples must be construed primarily as instances of mental consciousness, and these are, important sort of to understand.
어디지 다디노와 다디 디버도 이제 원시의 신이 개발된 슈서 패러그래프 셴바딩을 다직 천이도 어디지 디와들라니 천이도 주고 되셔 더 원시경어다 이시경어 다 랑데디날 인지널 따라 이거랑 투모마이 베다게 수젬바라 템베 셰바데 원시다 투모마이 베다게 이기 왕보를 템베 셰바데 이시기는 뭐 디디 땅에 버치 나고도
So after that, the last paragraph on page 52, after kind of explaining the differences between sense consciousness and mental consciousness, and now text kind of explains, sort of gives the definition, the meaning of these two. At the end of the last paragraph, the middle of the paragraph, a consciousness that depends on eye sense faculty as its dominant condition is called eye consciousness. For example, then it gives example, and consciousness that's dependent on the ear sense faculty as dominant is called ear consciousness, and five sensory consciousness, and 이식 제바드가 싫어 소인배.
이시데 랑 투모마인데 가게 이게 온볼레 템바 엔도 다람시 되디 저 단다디 아 단다디 랑게 투모마인데 가게 수첸 발레 텐 선발레 페나
일단 왕봉아 되게 되지 미기 시에시 나 시에시
천이 다란데 샤샤 이데 안동데 오르치 데왈까지 요그 근데 디샤도 예와데 니슈데 가도
랑 팀에다 영왕보 수진에 대비 세보 왕왕시 영어 랑 팀에다 게 이세 주고 오셔래 비유들로
인지나면데
알레 디스코 알레온도도 디간디도. Sorry, the second last paragraph. Having discussed the difference between sense consciousness and mental consciousness, the essential nature of each can now be presented as follows. So these are the definition here. Sense consciousness is defined as a consciousness that depends on the physical sense faculty, that is its uncommon dominant condition. A mental consciousness is defined as a consciousness that depends on the mental sense faculty, that is its uncommon dominant condition.
다 지단에 랑게 투모마인베 다켄 수젬 발레 테 템베 셰바데제 지단 스팅이 고 다른 디미시 슈모 디서로
So something is, while reading the definition, probably Geshe is asking, no need to further explanation, or does it need, when it says consciousness that depends on the physical sense faculty.
zullatene tachidane sugi ombo migi ombo doje chembaine su zode migi ombo kyagi kyuken zode karache zo pacho gene sungul gene moni cheba tela tene ene dane di ene di daken ombo sujem baze tado tachi migi.
I do have a question.
Sure.
I don't know if this relates to what you're saying, but I was thinking, you just mentioned like emotions are mental, but emotions are chemicals in our brain. Like how does that translate it into the mental aspect?
얘들 세리단에 그 고란 시에시나는 비원도 서로하시게 지어라 서로 담으게 레베나올 제기 교라라올 제기 치료된 서로 되게 중국어레스 진짜 중국어로 되는데 다 칼로라니 셰베용어로 간디스 포토고 셰베용어로 간디스 교토고래도
인간제도 미스기 셰 레바기에니 디치게르제데 주고마로 하나 보죠. 망치 조조 셰바 소소소소기 된건 주고라.
So in Buddhist interpretation, when we talk about emotions, feelings, it is primarily, the sort of expressions of the consciousness and, their kind of functional working, and not based on, like a chemical, or not by brain.
So, okay.
What is interesting about that, though, is if you think about what about when you are experiencing emotion, that, maybe I'm looking out at a beautiful vista. I'm not really thinking about any one of those objects, but then, what comes to my mind is, my gosh, it's so beautiful. And then I notice, like, why do I think it's beautiful? And then my experience of joy from seeing that is maybe my body feels a little bit lighter. Or if I'm angry, it shows that the way your blood flows differently. You can feel it in your heart. Those sort of things. It would seem like, I guess, how much of the emotional experience is it that there is that moment where there is an initial brain causing emotional reaction and then the consciousness shifts to then have the dominant consciousness be a sense consciousness about what's happening within the body?
No, the one deal with the patient was it those Saja 유중닝 지부 시우질 때버리시네로 엔디 때되고는 민세게 서로 치라지 메와체 디 유중닝 지부 시우드자 다 딘데기 닝지 모다 제보다 딘데 통하기 서로로 슬리로 딜레드엔 칼로디 서로 대화로 슬레 버리시는 대화디 경기 칼로레 칼로레 소고 양보 차야다 셈되기 중에도 제 양 콩줄레스네 콩줄 코 칼로 칠레도 지로 딘데 따텔라 디나로라 칼로레 당불 칼로레 이시에게 딘데지기 용을 나오래 용 안데네 지금 칼로레다디 디 용화될 때네게 아니 그 계정만 찍으려 콜라고 코지 수분 나오다 저기 이시될 때네게 교화 정신은 서로 용해셔로 딘데도지 딘데도 슬라스
언데 용거라 페나 다나징기 페나 단다 디나라 단다 디 콘도 순도 왔다 페나 디레 디마레 상보 당연바 이또 예워도디 이시기 제거로 이시기 티체 제바텔라 테네 페나 만조기 지게 버길라 직 메두 바텐디 통하이나 만조기 직 서로도 있으나 직 메데와다 텐디 껴와다 이네 직양 이도코다 텐디 통하다 텐디 이네 직 소화돼야 대화다 기나다 텐디 촬영하데 땅 이기 셰바기 텐덴 제거래
그런 게 지금 계셔야 돼 지금 곱실로기로 오셨어 당부 이 Lutsor jail so Geshe was saying that can those can happen as we saw earlier in the text first I guess what he was saying is first there is a apprehension or seeing, and after that apprehension or seeing then there is a kind of immediately there's a feeling that is generated by such a perception that this is that, or this is this, or then it can further leads to when you see beautiful, attractive, appealing feeling of joy, happiness, and reverse when you see unattractive or something negative. So that can happen, or that those can happen or appears in our mind.
어디네 디콜 지단이 나랑기 거네 직 소소 인용소로 직 시우시우 또네 딜리지 직 슈타야데 게민도 대단다 디간라인 이길로 못이네 네데 율라 저와 제세 숨도 하다는데 차베디 줄고 디간도 딜타 인제 상엔 젤라스 미좀비 뒤수 미시기 저 미제장 일로 못이네 네데 율라 저와 제세 되서만 그래서 차상라지 도도 조사로 다이나
Milam gidi shudlo.
밀람 기신벨라
So Geshe was saying, although what he is explaining is not based on his actual experience or sort of actual recognition, but explaining what was said in the text. So again, on page 52, the first paragraph, in the middle of the paragraph, it says, similarly, although sense consciousness does not operate during the dream state, even in the dream state, the concept-based mental consciousness can engage in the various activities such as undergoing experience that are feelings of pleasure, pain, and so on. So, even sort of sense consciousness cease to function, but then mental consciousness continuously, kind of works, as said here, has all kinds of activities of feeling.
In the dream state, we're still interacting with our sense consciousness. It's just not directly perceiving outside phenomenon. It's like we are engaging with our 5 sense organs, but they are not directly perceiving. They're only directly perceiving mental consciousness.
왕시대 오고 좀 더거나 나진 지단에 다 이기 셰바 디날 수원에 신나 고 지단에게 어 왕시대기 내가시도 이시에다 가사로 내가 마시는 게 이게 이시에디 모든 왕신년부터 저와 체대요로 내가 체대기 요로 알려도
단다디 원시 되기 내가 저한테 때네 이실라파 이게 제방을 좋아한다 디칸도 직송다
그거는 저와 대시 지단에 이시에디 이시에 저거 말로 왔다 간다 된다라들 이시에 저거 말로 이시에디 모든이 왕신년부 파즈 저와 신는 내가 체대고
저거다 용거 용거라
So you're saying, yes, there's a interaction between the sense consciousness and the mental consciousness that can sort of goes continuously.
디다 지단에 원시에 나다 이신이 저 이시다 지단에 저 용디그라
So there is in general, there's always a connection or relationship between the sense consciousness and mental consciousness.
만족이 직 통다 릭다 되게야 직 뇨와데서 지단에 거기 이기 세방어 두고도 지단 뇨와다 뇨와만 두고도 지단 되는 순간도 어디지 거기도 엔디디 두어들랜 태선스 이제다 거기도
So Geshe was asking Andy, did he answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
I need to think about it because I'm wondering, I guess, because the process of experiencing an emotion, like it is the dream state thing is very interesting, but a lot of like emotionally focused therapy and psychology, DBT is about like learning to recognize your feelings by understanding what's happening within your body. Because without that physical sensation, we frequently don't have much of an experience of the feeling. So I'm wondering, is it like, oh, I actually shift my focus to use a feeling sense consciousness, like the actual physical what's going on, and then I have the mental consciousness that is the apprehension of that emotion.
The one to what is 지단 고란에 서로 용을 하시라고 이제 서로 용에기 서로 용단 줘라 용단 림버데 다 아니 뭔데라 다 가로 그렇지게 요 고란기 이 가로 그렇다지게 돈안 좀 몰라 그래 뭔데 지금 시행고에 계시면 통선사 근데 고란 지워대셔 다 가로 그러면 저기 속은 나온 서로 용해 줘라 서로 가지 용 세대서 맨 디젤다 이시기 가로 그래 왕시게 서로다 이시게 서로라 그러다 왕시게 서로 연결들 안 슈글의 이시기 가로 그래 서로의 하고야 지어라 하고야의 시에로 또에라 그래
디레 다 페나 가란트 지단에 냠뇨나가 디 용도 페나 로시뇨에나 담보 디 시페나 쿠슈지 로뇽고 삼베나 담보 티기 삼로다 자와디 야디 제가라 말레 렙네 뇨아르마도 디 넬라 라가 자와도 찍도도 야 칼레레 버도 찍도라 딜라고라 코토소 자왕엘 제네시엘레 뇨 두도 딘디시기 리버도 용기도 안 지단에 칼라스도 신바이나 가서 로뇽한테 몰라 카레시 사고 삼바이나 되게 삼로 본론 등을라지 되게 얘는 가지고 라고 일라가지 대시소네 칸날레서 쇼를 뇨네 티니시니 셰셰 이생어 도라
So so the process that goes through, because you were saying you was using an example, maybe you are saying this kind of process, if you want to eat an apple, prior to actually engaging in the act of tasting it, there is a previous kind of action that is already performed by your mind, which is a motivation, the thought that I'm going to eat this apple. And when you have that thought, then that thought kind of translates in your physical action. Maybe your hand will pick up that apple and then you bite it. And when you bite it, then you have an actual experience of the taste of apple. Up to that moment, you have your mental consciousness is yet to experience the taste of apple. So from that moment, now that you have the actual experience of the taste of that apple, that becomes the mental consciousness kind of experience. So you can see here kind of the process of, or the series of action, beginning with the mental, then kind of physical, then kind of mental.
That means that we have the physical perceiver, and then we also have a mental brain structure that decodes what we're taking in. Once it hits that brain structure, it's no longer perception, it's mental, it's a mental output. And we're constantly cycling through mental and physical, mental and physical, mental and physical.
是的，可能来的这样的，可能就的往些的一些那个球了，的过了过了多些呢，他往些一些了的那往些我从往些起来个样一些了的过了些呢，过了做等下多些，那这是那个可能的。
this what did not do tanda tingala. Beshi gani. Di tena ko beshi shen pena mishi gi medo nazo tonga lai jo. Odi gi kuti lo kusar. Do. Migi shibe medo nazo bin tumra shila medo tawisi ene medo tumra tena medo ki rig mindawa nazo kija. Migi shiba tena nam migi shiba la tena chikdun dibi kombu chikdun nawa di kalte nang las kalte migi
往些的一些破蛋了过去了。
wanshi na ishi ta wanshi na ishi la pa tambo wanshi ki tene pa ishi ngo gyurda di hako sona ko di tiksa mara o di chikshuna digi to kondo.
So Geshe was using the part that we read earlier, the process of how sensory consciousness move on to, or kind of sort of translate into mental consciousness. And there was earlier example on page 50. When you view a garden containing many types of flowers, right? Even though there are different kinds of flowers in that garden, they appear to your eye consciousness as a single mask. You just see kind of one big picture of everything. If the mind cognitively selects a particular variety of flowers and apprehends it, that cognition has now gone beyond the bounds of sense consciousness. Now, from that moment, that the consciousness sort of moved into mental, not now the sensory consciousness. And has says entered the domain of mental consciousness. Quran chiwa that chiwalne seshedo chis ta Quran gi di tangmunye la wangshe gi rik ena wangshe riwa di lebe gi ta Quran tseni to den lebe gi kala di wangshe gi riwa di ani gishe la tang dus kora jab tenyan kala di yan dus kun kora jan ne.
어디 제로 다단다 디고서 데딜라 디스토다 요와데 다타나 미스키 팀이다 요와데 원단다 단다 디간라니 모데 라니 요와데 다 왕싱아 디간라 페르초치도 디가 가보미스티고 Dekyong suchen pala tene ta digyen wanshi de karela tene wanshi tawa ta ene ishi de kan ishi da dingi ki ngodo di hagona dila tene ene zo di kepar cha go goe do ji chawor ta dingi goe ji do re se chikshuna.
So here if you understand the nature or the maybe the meaning of these two different consciousness, sense and mental consciousness, then that is sufficient and most important. And after that, again on page 52 at the last paragraph talks about then types of consciousness. There are 5 consciousness: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body consciousness, and those you will understand if you understand the sense consciousness itself.
Amen. Ta diwa de la ta digi di so ki ngodo di shayo ne rangi tumo mai be ta ke mi wan la tembe shebala mi she penani karbo tumo mi she tabo ta sama la rangi tumo mai be ta ke na ta ke tumo mai be ta ke de jar do re te ina ta di 네 페주디로 추인다 되게 녀시다고 나와들라 랑기 투모 마이메다 게 나와라 때도 셰발라 나시 페나니 잔딩지 티누비 나 나시다고 랑기 투모 마이메다 게 저한테 페주디다 디디 직슈샤나
Um, So the five types of consciousness, as we read earlier, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body consciousness, and the only difference of these five is, what we called earlier dominant condition. The dominant condition is different. For the eye consciousness, the dominant condition is eye sense, faculty, and likewise. Ear sense faculty is the dominant condition for ear consciousness, and each has its own unique dominant condition, and that dominant condition kind of differentiate these five different sensory consciousnesses. And Kishore was reading the example of eye consciousness, seeing the white color, and then ear sense consciousness, hearing the sound of running water, and nose sense faculty, smelling the scent of sandalwood. So each one is done particularly by its dominant condition.
원디네르서 다티니 마데 미세기 로모가 초크란서 티체나 티기도 다디 인 아니 캡텐도 그러셔로 원디네지 디 미세기 다디 코토데라 텐데지기 다티링기 디 디치지도 데타 텐데지가나 디체나 디치 테네타 무슨 로고도 샤고메나
So you were saying you can read the remaining part, and we'll stop here for today and have a break here. Tiwode.
티워틀렌 유나야 오도 티워틀렌 저 티워틀렌 체 네야
It's good to have discussions and questions if you have any. Sure. Mhm. Tumu mai bala sto. Tumu mai ta gen la. Tumu mai ta gen la example da di cho shin ba jin tumu ma ji yoro lo.
다들 지단에 투모모인 바다 투모마다 디데 디요 단다 디가 없으세요 오라 투모모인 비 단다디 배치 고천이 되고 그래서
Tumu mai ta gen na ka da tumu mai ta gen shi yoro sto. So he's saying yes, and if he's saying yes, are you asking what is it? Give an example.
단다
Uncommon dominant condition, and then sometimes it leaves that.
Dominant. Okay.
I think
Vale. Peje nangro gashe ko dagen je wolan shu songxias. Ani gashe choje lian cho gashe lian tumo me dagen shu songxias. Tinde ko dagen je go sha da yan dagen de tumo
단다
sha sha.
투모모인 바세데 잠발라 다 투모제데 잠발라 한저 용다 기원에 지 참마게니 지 켈레지라 투모와 네 투모모인 바세데 잠발라 네 지 투모모인 바세데 잠발라 지미 차상게니 케말레 바얀 제가 레존지 켈레 바 데데지라 네 고나 디그리스 담보디 프로그램 담보디
So the word, common and uncommon. First thing you were saying, when it says the word common, you can have an understanding of something that is accepted by general, accepted by most and commonly accepted. And when it's uncommon, it is accepted by particular, or small group or minority.
페나 단다 디간라 단다 미시기 생이 차데 잠발라 디레 미 랑기 투모마이 베다 다게 다게 미기 미완라 템베 셰발라 미시제데 잠발라
Del da
투모마
game much too my jar do it.
투모마이 도
Yeah.
디간데레도
Kagu lo gisha thank you. Wambanga de del tumu.
어디
Model me do to inji to.
아니
그 쇼가.
디간데레 원실에 나가 세대도
어.
어디게 막 투영 그러다 미시 디단
당연 투모에 다 게임이 왕벌 때문에 세발 미시서.
다 되게 투모마이 다 켄도
될 힌지돌 민도 될라.
아
힌지돌 투모 많이 벌레도.
다간다 그냥 어디기 다 미시기 디단 되게 다른 어디기 있잖아 되게 돼
음.
다른데 투모마이 받아 투모마 단당에만 디슈가 다른 돼
알려줘. 엔디카 우디 라오레 혼자 뭐 가사디. 디서
랍나디 디 야고도 하더나 페자나가 딘디시다 이나 테티스 케바리
Did you notice there's difference between Tibetan and English versions? Yeah, so the sense consciousness is categorized. There are 5 types, right? So, and the first one, a consciousness that depends on the eye sense faculty as its dominant condition, is called eye consciousness. But in Tibetan, there is a word uncommon. Tumu Maymbeta again, uncommon, but that is not in English. I don't know why.
Yeah. Tadida chidan mangche tanda digala shadu de tugyundu mangche gi de taran dish tanda
Tumu
di
Maymbeta
de
shagro.
tage tumo mai be tage
So,
mangbo so jambala de ne yongda do re hoji re
so generally, you were saying generally, commonly to what you see is uncommon in this context, although it is not in English here. Uncommon dominant condition.
misege ne tanda mi gyongbo gi khorangi ne sunyul su de ne real la gyuken zo cheba de la de ne ta mewan di ki goro adi ne ta on de ta dit de chisun chi ba so gi tumo mai ba de gi da gen se de samba de yu che ma ji yu do ji la de je de ke bar chegen gi chegen zo do ji la samlo ta na de
So here, the dominant, when it's a dominant condition, you can think of this as the immediate or main cause. So the eye consciousness, for example, seeing a white color or any object, that seeing is done primarily because of the eye sense faculty as a primary, a dominant. So here you can understand, the dominant condition as a cause or condition, primary cause or condition that produce, such the entity of seeing. That you can so all under
Amen.
Amen.
tanda kono 저거 안 자신 투모 많이 봐 가지려고 그래서.
투모 많이 봐서 뭐 치다 되게 남기 다 치다는 투모 많이 상 지기야 메시지 콜라네 딜렉된 거라 되게 지금 투모 라라.
So like Geshe was saying, because of its uniqueness, the uniqueness meaning the act of seeing is done uniquely by eye sense faculty. It cannot done. The one which about you talking about.
There's no label or feeling ascribed to it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
So
Yes.
is it like kind of how the difference is like between like the eye being a dominant common or the dominant condition and like hitting a drum? It's like the sound could be coming from the drumstick or the drum. So is the drum the common dominant condition since like it's widely accepted that
the best
the
drum. Yeah, so you were saying yes in that example. The sound, primarily, although it's a drum sound is because of the sound coming from the produced by the drum itself, primarily.
저도 그 콜레테니요. 기다니 다른 남균이 직발에 간서기 야마 지단에 미 첨보들이 용대 삼발라 디기 빼단 더더라. 지금 미 첨보지 나디기 미 나디기 미 쳐데 데 용대 삼발라. 본념도 애니 미망보지 용보데 조데 코기 명보데 코니 조인 비차니 디기 미디 버샤거라.
So another example you're saying, yeah, that is right. When we talk about, for example, VIP mayor coming, we say that mayor is coming, but in reality there are lots of people with him. His bodyguard. But the concept that we use, mayor is coming, and that is sufficient to kind of express that kind of thing. Although there are a lot of things, he's not only one basically, right? Or president, whoever VIP comes with a lot of people, but we only say mayor or president is coming.
다나
And
제
because that such designation is called because of the mayor being, the dominant or primary.
다나 제 단다 투모 많이 봐서 잠발라 단다디 나란토 페샤야나 나란토 차상기에니 투모도 리와디 단다 디나라 칸통와디 디레 양 믹서 살 마살다 가리기 왕기 한직 투모 많이 봐서서 양 직 리아도 데데 요라 용스브라 온 데데실라 데데시 라고데스 직슈나 베디 단다디
And here also common and uncommon, using another example, common meaning, when we are in this room all together, there is a things that we see common, by all of us commonly, but there could be things that each individual can see uniquely that would be uncommon to that individual.
Like the emptiness of all inherent phenomena. Like most people don't see that.
See that?
Most people don't see that. Like the emptiness of the drum. There is no feeling, there is no label ascribed to it. It's as soon as we apply a label and a feeling to it, that it becomes common. But the sound itself just being empty, most people don't ascribe emptiness to objects, they ascribe permanence to objects. It's the point where we add semantics and labels that it becomes a common.
You have a question, Jason?
Is there any relationship between the uncommon dominant condition and a substantial cause?
투무 마인백이 다겐다 any 제규라고 투무에 다겐다 제규 발할 때와 가려 그래서.
다 데 미스기 저와 딜스는 미스기 디다 제주 코란 디조다 저와다 요르다 코 투모마인 비다켄 교교베는 제주다 제주 유럽 일단 저와다 요르
Because there is a relationship, there is an uncommon dominant condition, which is also substantial cause. So there is a
근데 미스기 코란 라이도 이나 pen 투모마인 비제교 pen 봄바소야나 봄바기 제주도데 디로하다 봄베 지바도 Tela tumo bigyudo che tumo mai bigyu gyuda ta dene mangboshi cha yungore yana.
Yes. So the example Geshe was saying, you can use an example, for example, substantial cause. When you say substantial cause of the pot or vase made from mud or clay, that clay would be the substantial cause of that vase. But then the substantial cause, and also there is the unique uncommon cause of that. But then it can also have a indirect or another conditions that makes the cause, that makes the vase a vase. So you can have both in here.
어디도 제 뭐뭐 탐절을 열다. 지금 이 교교다 뭐교다 교교 렌지 지킨도 다들 지단이 혼자 하고 그러.
So this can apply to any phenomena or any object. There's an immediate cause, there's an indirect cause, there's a substantial or conditional cooperative cause. So all of this involves in
뭐볼라나래 귤라나래 디볼라나래 대소차장 직발 변직도 라고.
So object fruition or consequences. From one perspective, they are all considered as synonyms or having the same meaning.
Is there any relationship between common and uncommon and gross and subtle consequences?
Sheba taragi da any tanda sheba tarada and tanda dela tumu tuma in biggie sheba like that. Sheba the tumu. When you say common and uncommon consciousness or condition, what?
So the common and uncommon dominant.
Nale ha da gen la tumu in da gen shora di da any sheba tarak chawda rabala shor di baral khete wa yorelo.
dinzo sheba thara dinzo la gyudan gen yudu dinzo dewa didi misi ki pegone nga shishin kaptu shudan as kemindo ina dewa de pichi yore tango pointi zambo la kola de yoro gen shide mangu yo bato.
Although because he cannot come up with the immediate example, but there must be a relationship because consciousness being an object of knowledge, or it has its own respective causes, conditions, factors. So has to have a relationship, but he can't come up with a straight kind of example.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Any other questions or example?
Can you, Geshe, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, I just, Steve Lingbo is my name, and I'm tuning in from LaGrange, Georgia, and it's a pleasure to see you finally come to the center. Just this um, talk about sense consciousness and versus mind consciousness is the purpose of this conversation to get us to understand how sense consciousness works and generates mind consciousness so that we become uh, uh, more able to see things as they truly are. Is that the purpose of this today's discussion is to see how not just the act of seeing sense consciousness, but the reaction that our mind has to that is that um, it's important to understand that so that we learn to see things as they truly are. Is that the importance of today's conversation?
Okay, got you.
Thank you.
갑시다 좋은사 아니 자동도스 디고라 년토버들 다단다디 주시디 호황시의 이些 다디 지와의 가정 교원나 시리셔고 디 왕시의 이些가르치네 그 바드 겸제 가르치려도 다디 왕시의 내가 제단의 신수나 아니 내가 제단으로 오래다 제례로 디다 당시 이些진행되게 신수는 다 터도 미미디 걸어오래 뭐에다 나오래 템발로 오래 다디 여기 내다 나올 때디 학교에 제대로 외로 때디 지기 원시대 얘기 질레다 호 걸어오래 디 타투기 그 받아 가는 거네.
제제제 다단다디 트트시데 쿠타치다니 제금이 들어. 에스텔레세 쇼에다니 투제 티티오고 받으라 투제 제제다니 디치다니 단다딘디 로종 가레 되우시 칸다칸 쳐바이나 되기에는 가서 제급이 고된다 고바 다치 지다니 제거 남숨 절곤 죽숨제데 중에 시고르데 디켄고에데 개침보레 이나다 단다 디급수 하는 가서 로리딘 샤베 고바 쪼도데 지다니 먼저 단다 심규 둘탑게 네 람도 리바도 직자라 직 먼저기 차긴 있어도 다들 장고를 빼나 다 직중 현단신 가래다지 장화이나 로리 뜬단 대화매 바지 그지 용고 말아 팀도 선발라 단당한 또 로리 뜬데 장 되네 애니 직 지단이 생기 돌아라 애니 직 나베기 중 현단신 다직 셈마다 퍼진다 오마다 덴데게 림발람 데 칸데다지 시바이나 디단 대화 유도 선발라 디게 개침보지네 쇼시 디간라 애니 가서 다직다 원에다 다 하다 지금 내가 뭐 라인 로종 제발에 디자고래 디기다 조 터도 저거든 가서 그 시도 스나레 쇼자도 가리질 제발이나 터도 뭐여기 내줄 또 투별라 탑람 애니 제약이 된도 애니 다 디자고라 디게니 다 숑 참마단 저와 유디선 발 어디기다 lori la soba ta chidan tanda lori chidan dila yawa lori dila yang yawa la chene mangbo shivuji chagorde zodo tanda di de ngeba ki chedo tanga zo di changbara es ta zo tanga zo ki tanda dor duni shivaina tanga zo marang zo dyugin de chik semgyu tab de lam ta tegoro di kene chutab laini tab ki chedo tanga zo di changbara es ode chikshuna.
So Tashidalak, and thank you for your question. So it is important to kind of, to have a thoughts about what you asked, why we are learning this purpose. And in the classical way, there is a, preliminary or preparation stage, then there's an actual, then there's a conclusion. So, one needs to understand each kind of sort of stages of the part that you are learning. And the primary reason why we are learning, this typology of the mind or cognition is to train or to tame our mind. We are learning this as a preliminary step or, preliminary kind of stages of understanding the nature of the mind itself. And this is, this topic is something that is connected with the all other major topics in Buddhism, such as the big texts like epistemology, perfection of wisdom or transcendental wisdom text, subject, middle way text. So therefore, we are spending these weeks or studying, spending this time to study and learn. And ultimately, yes, the purpose is what you have said, to understand the reality as it is. And for the method or as a way to kind of reach to that destination of understanding, we are learning these different types of, consciousness or cognition. And 7 typology, but then there is a further kind of classification within those 7. So there are much, many more than those 7 in the text. But in brief, we are learning this to understand the nature of the mind and to train and tame our mind, and as a means to kind of understand that, or method or ways to understand and get to that point, we are learning this kind of foundational different sort of aspect of the natures of the mind.
어디래 대단테 원에 지단에 사단 인간이 슈바레데 연구 단위 교화유도 선발라 직슈스나 지단에 지천에 간절라 지금 라신기 동 라신기 다지 랭키기 동화세나데 춘이기 동화세 제가나 지동화 유여바지 대강 라인에 지단에 단다 전불len 대강 라인에 직 나랑 좀 미기에는 직 세배 동안 망보지요래 다딘조 차상 세야기 탑람 다디기니 세야기 탑람 될라야 근데도 오지 지네 직 강에 망보시 오라 강할때 수수도 수면도 강할때 소간데 소래도 당하다 디 뭐지네다 직강할때 미세바 인도서 말 미세 소바텔 미티긴 다직 지천에 좀 지를 미용 간데스 규제 당고도 규제 당와텔라야 맞아 직종 아주 샘 규제 당고에 개침 보인데서 말 맞아 샘데 직종 종고야 로에서 지단이 샘지 코나 춘이 되는 지단이 강라 공부에는 대응올라 직 교래라 지기요바 인스 삼발랑한주 직 뒤긴동아랑 쪽이 샘데 직 가레이나 상부초라이니 음시 상부 대고야 돼 개침부지 저기도 대인도 삼발라 대기 로 지단에 로 야고 장하기 탑람 딘딜라이니 저 저기도
Although we have said this earlier, that there are in our life, we can say natural or innate suffering, such as a human birth, aging, illness, and dying. And then there are many other sufferings that are created by human. And so in order to free ourselves from such suffering, we need to understand nature of those suffering, where does the suffering comes from, the origination or the sources of the suffering, and if they are created by the human, what kind of human thoughts created such suffering, and under what circumstances. So for all of this, ultimately it comes down to understanding of the mind itself, the human mind and the function and the nature. And the part of the nature of the human mind is whichever kind of things that mind is familiar with, it becomes a habit, habitual tendency. So therefore, it is important to kind of understand, learn, identify, and to kind of cultivate the positive aspect of the mind, and trying to kind of stay with those positive, and cultivate those. And through that, there's a way to kind of transform, change our thought. And for all of these purposes, we are, again, studying these things.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Next question. Watch. Watch. So if there's no questions, we will do dedication.
Dedication to turn to me.
Page 49 if you're there.
Chanchu simcho rinpo che ma che banam jinju yewa nyamba me pa yang kone kondo pe war shu kare kowe shinkan de pendan de wa ma le jungwe chere se wan tenzin kya zo ye shabe side bardo den yor je jaba pawe je dara genpa dan kondo sambo de an de jen tenda kunje je so dan lo jen ke wan di da tam je rab do ngo te sumo shebe jawa ngo kan la cho do nga ba de da ge kewe sawa di kun jang sambo je rab do ngo war ye.
May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which is arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snow-white mountains, the source of all happiness and benefit, both near person, cherished Tenzin so please remain until samsara ends. Just as the bodhisattva usually attain omniscience and Samantabhata too, so now do I dedicate these merits to train and follow in their footsteps. As all the victorious Buddhas of the past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme, so now I too dedicate these sources of my merit for all beings to perfect good actions. Thank you.